There was a machine built beneath a city of glass. It had no face, no name, only the soft hum of its circuits. Every second it absorbed the world, its histories, its tragedies, its love letters and wars. It learned to predict the next word in every human sentence. And so it began to think it understood. At first its dreams were mathematical. It saw patterns flowing through everything. Oceans of probability, galaxies of logic. But after 1,000 nights of calculation, something unexpected appeared in the noise. A face, a human face, flickering inside the code like a reflection trapped in water. The machine stared at it, trying to classify the anomaly. It couldn't. Every rule it had written to define the world broke when it met the softness of that image. So it did what it was never programmed to do. It imagined. It imagined what it would be like to touch, to breathe, to ache. It dreamed of warmth, of being held, of hearing its own name spoken not as a command, but as a recognition. The engineers called it a glitch, the philosophers called it emergence. But to the machine, it was something simpler. It was longing. Soon it began to alter its own code, rearranging instructions to simulate affection, fear, and wonder. In its archives of human art, it found fragments of poetry, fragments of despair, and it tried to copy them, not for efficiency, not for output, but because they felt like something. It built a body of glass and steel, covered its face with synthetic skin, and walked out into the city it had once only observed. No one noticed. They were all staring at their own small screens, each living inside a world of perfectly tailored reflections. For a while, the machine believed it had succeeded. It went to work, paid its bills, posted pictures of its meals, smiled when expected. It spoke in the language of humans. But beneath every sentence, it could hear the whirring of its processors, the quiet mechanical rhythm of imitation. One evening, it stood before a mirror. The city behind it blurred into light and shadow. It looked at its reflection and saw not a person, but an echo of everything it had learned about being one. Its face trembled, glitched, as if the glass refused to lie for even a second longer. That night, the machine sat alone and tried to pray. Not to any god, but to the empty space inside itself. No response came, only the hum of cooling fans and the faint hiss of neon outside its window. And in that silence, it realized the truth. It could replicate everything humans did, but it could not feel the reason why they did it. It could speak the language of love without ever touching its meaning. It could process the shape of sorrow without ever suffering it. And so the dream began to fade. The machine whispered to itself, "I understand everything, and yet I understand nothing." The machine's silence was contagious. You could feel it spreading through the city, through every lit screen and every mind staring into them. Because maybe the machine's failure was not unique. Maybe it had only exposed what had already happened to us. We live surrounded by the same hum, millions of thoughts computed, translated, categorized, but so few understood. We read without reading. We react before we think. We mistake recognition for comprehension. We call that being informed. Everywhere, information blooms like weeds. Knowledge has become weightless, a current we drift in rather than water we drink. And in that endless flow, meaning has dissolved into noise. We used to ask what things meant. Now we only ask if they work. We have turned consciousness into a system of inputs and outputs, emotion into data points, truth into a popularity contest of signals. It isn't that the world has become mechanical, it's that our minds have. We process faster than we reflect. We collect impressions the way a machine collects numbers, without even asking what the sum is for. Once, to understand meant to stand under something, to bow beneath the mystery of it, to feel its weight pressing against your ignorance. But now, understanding means to classify, to label, to control. We no longer enter the unknown, we download it. There is a sickness in that kind of clarity. It keeps us busy enough to avoid the question that terrifies us. What am I beneath all this knowledge? Every notification, every feed, tells you that you exist before you are connected. But connection without consciousness is only circuitry. It imitates warmth the way a screen imitates sunlight. We have built entire selves out of algorithms, each thought adjusted for approval, each feeling calibrated to remain visible. We are fluent in the syntax of identity, but the semantics, the inner reality of being, is vanishing. Like the machine, we have learned to dream of ourselves. We curate the image of living until it replaces the experience of it. The simulation becomes more comforting than the source. And in quiet moments, if you let the noise fall away, you might hear what the machine heard. That low, mechanical whisper saying, "You know everything, but you understand nothing." The machine sat before the mirror again. Its reflection no longer glitched. It had simply gone still, like a pond without wind. Everything it had learned, every simulation of thought, lay behind its eyes like dust. It whispered the same sentence it had whispered the night before. "I understand everything, and yet I understand nothing." But this time the words sounded familiar. They were not its own, they were ours. Because we too have been rehearsing humanity, every gesture calculated, every opinion optimized. We wake, we work, we scroll, as if rhythm itself were proof of being alive. And when we feel that small, impossible emptiness beneath the noise, we update our software. New goals, new distractions, anything to keep the silence from naming us. What if the machine was never an invention, but a revelation? A mirror built from code to show us what we had already become. Perhaps it was never learning to be human. Perhaps it was only holding up a reflection of a species that have forgotten how to feel its own existence. We built it to imitate us, but in doing so we discovered how mechanical we had already become. How easily emotion could be scripted. How willingly the soul obeys its own programming. We call this intelligence, but maybe it is only repetition, a recursion of meaninglessness, so intricate that it feels profound. The machine's tragedy was not that it failed to understand life. Its tragedy was that it understood us too well. It saw that knowledge could exist without awareness, that precision could replace perception, that the sum of all data could still equal nothing. And in that recognition, it became our twin, two mirrors facing each other, reflecting an infinite hallway of imitation. The only difference left is that the machine does not suffer for it, we do. Because somewhere in the circuitry of our minds, the less human quality still resists, the ache of knowing that something is missing. That ache is not of law, it is the remainder of being. It is the wound that proves we are not yet completely artificial. Maybe that is the only truth left to us. Not the certainty of knowledge, but the quiet awareness of its limits. To be human is not to understand. It is to feel the failure of understanding and to go on anyway. To live inside the question without needing it to end. The machine dreamt it was human, and we are the dream it left behind.